Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. This is an event on the islands as hubs of innovation. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Mike Robinson. I'm the Chief Executive of the Royal Scottish Geographical Society, and I've worked for many years in climate change on behalf of civil society in Scotland. I can tell you that Scotland is very proud of its climate targets, and everybody in this country is very keen to see this to be the most successful event it possibly can be. And we are very pleased to be one of the countries that's really making an effort. And I hope that we can work with those of you that are really keen to support that too.
Oh no.
I'm delighted this afternoon to be joined by a prestigious panel. We have Cabinet Secretary Mary Gougen from the Scottish Government. We have Alphonse Roblem from the Alland Isles, and we have Rasmus Wendt from Greenland. And we're going to hear from each of them in succession. We'll then open it up to a couple of questions from anybody here. So, without any further ado, Mary.
Thank you. Hello everyone, and I'm just really delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you all today about climate change and the effect that it's having on our islands and what we're doing here in Scotland as we work towards becoming a net zero nation by 2045. And it really is an honour to be joined by my fellow attendees from Greenland and the Alland Islands. I'm trying, I hope my pronunciation is okay, and really to speak at such an important event and to highlight how our islands can be hubs of climate innovation. Now, climate change and nature loss are the greatest threats that are facing our people and our planet, and of course we're already seeing the impact of that here in Scotland. And COP26 is the world's biggest chance and best chance to align with the goals of the Paris Agreement and deliver lasting action towards a resilient net zero future in a way that is fair and also in a way that's just. Now, amid the enormous challenges of the global pandemic, the climate emergency hasn't gone away, and far from it. The Scottish Government remains absolutely committed to ending Scotland's contribution to climate change. Indeed, it's central to our recovery here. Now, we have the opportunity to design a better future and, coming out of the pandemic, to put things back together in a different way. Now, many of you will know that Scotland has declared a climate emergency and that we've really stepped up our climate actions and our commitments. And these are amongst some of the most ambitious in the world, calling for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045. And that's 5 years before the UK government target is set out in our 2019 Climate Change Act. Now, we're deeply proud to welcome this UN Climate Change Conference to Scotland. And this global gathering really gives us a unique opportunity to advance the societal and economy-wide transformation that's demanded by the climate and nature crisis, with a focus on action, a focus on people, as well as on values. Now, we want to use this event as a catalyst to further our climate agenda in Scotland, position Scotland as a credible partner and leader in tackling global climate action, to see advances in a just transition and climate justice, attract new investment and innovation, and ensure sustainable growth for Scotland. Now, our islands reflect the nation that we are. They help define how international audiences see Scotland and contribute hugely to our national identity, while also preserving and promoting their own unique local identities too. Each of our islands is unique in its own way, and our islanders have a really strong sense of community. And add to that their important economic role, their spectacular natural environment and rich cultural heritage. And you can see why people from all over the world come to visit and why they have a very special affection for our Scottish Islands too. Now, against this background, I'm sure that we'll all have seen the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, which shows the very real threat and the heightened risk that the climate emergency poses to our planet. And that report, of course, makes clear that with immediate, concerted and international action to reduce emissions, global temperature rise can still be limited to 1.5 degrees from pre-industrial times in the longer term. And it's crucial that the international community uses COP26 to raise global climate ambition and action. Now, small low-lying islands are under threat from climate change and predicted sea level rise. Climate change is expected to increase instances of flooding and coastal erosion, while simultaneously negatively affecting water supply, food production, health, tourism, and accelerating habitat depletion. Now, additionally, the majority of our island economies are highly dependent on outside sources for food, for fuel, and even employment, which together increase the economic fragility of our islands. Now, this is not affecting only islands far away from Scotland, such as those in the South Pacific, but it's hitting very close to home with communities who are concerned about sea level rise and other negative climate change effects on Scottish islands. However, there are vast opportunities for our island communities to really lead the way in showing how we can realise our climate ambitions. So, for example, the European Marine Energy Centre in Orkney is the world's only fully accredited test and research centre for wave and tidal power, and it's a global centre of expertise. The first hybrid electric plane in Scotland has taken to the skies above Orkney. Ampere's twin-engine Cessna aircraft has been modified to run on both battery power and conventional combustion engine, and it's hoped that the flight could be the first step towards a low-carbon solution for airlines right around the world. Now, the Scottish Government's hydrogen policy statement confirms that both renewable, green, and low-carbon, blue hydrogen will place an increasingly important role in our energy transition to net zero in 2045. Now, as I've already shared today, many communities have exciting ambitions to be important renewable energy hubs. And this includes establishing hydrogen production facilities to really make use of islands' wind, wave, and tidal generation capacity. Now, we are wholeheartedly supporting this through the Islands Growth Deal, which is funding a range of areas, including energy transition and local sustainable economic recovery and growth. Communities have a key role to play in Scotland's energy transition to net zero, and in developing our island's energy strategy, we want to ensure that our island communities and their differing needs and priorities are reflected, and that renewable solutions explored and implemented really support our islands and their communities' future sustainability. Now, many of you may know that the Scottish Government passed the Islands Scotland Act in 2018. We believe that this is a world-leading piece of legislation which continues to be a central pillar of our islands policy. As a result of that act, Scotland's first ever National Islands Plan was published in December 2019, following a very extensive consultation exercise across more than 40 of our islands. Now, the plan is designed carefully to be fair, to be integrated, green and inclusive, and it sets out 13 strategic objectives and over 100 commitments to help us deliver improved outcomes for islands across Scotland. Now, a key pillar of the National Islands Plan is that it's a green plan, and as such, I'm determined that it will play its part in delivering on Scotland's global leadership on climate change. A green plan isn't just about protecting our beautiful islands or their biodiversity and dealing efficiently with biosecurity. It's also about focusing on the challenges as well as the opportunities that Scotland's islands have because of their environment, their people, their natural resources and their assets. Now, our islands have an abundance of outstanding natural resources, from unique ecosystems such as Machair, which is one of the rarest habitats in Europe, to powerful winds and tides. The National Islands Plan provides an opportunity to harness the potential of a blue and a green economy in times of a climate emergency. Now, a green plan also recognises the concerns of the people on the islands that engaged with our consultation. And it talks in particular to those who understand, probably better than others because of the threat that it poses to them, the dangers of climate change. And at the same time, a green plan aligns with Scotland as a global leader in its wider efforts to tackle climate change. Now, not only will islands play their role in the government's climate change ambition to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2045, the plan will also support islands to become hubs of innovation when it comes to renewables and electricity generation. Islands also have the potential to really lead the way in terms of adaptation by relying on good governance and effective management of land and biodiversity. Now, specifically within the National Islands Plan, there's a strategic objective which states that we will contribute to climate change mitigation and adaptation and promote clean, affordable and secure energy. Now this recognises that while reducing emissions is essential, we have to prepare for the climate changes which are already locked in, and as a nation we have to adapt to these changes. Against this background, and in order to be truly sustainable, the implementation of the National Islands Plan will build on and align with, where possible, Scotland's wider climate change commitments, our policies and strategies, as well as with existing energy-related schemes. Now, we're taking great care to ensure that all of our actions in relation to the Islands Plan, across all of its strategic objectives, are in line with the Scottish Government's wider climate change commitments. And one example of this is the Dynamic Coast project, which has sought to map the extent of coastal erosion across Scotland. And it's highlighted that a reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions is essential, but it has to be delivered alongside adaptation of coastal infrastructure and communities too. Now, looking to the future, a focus on the climate emergency and recovery from the pandemic really go hand in hand. And that provides us with a great opportunity to achieve the strategic objectives that we've set out in our National Islands Plan. Our new Islands programme is investing £30 million over the next 5 years to ensure that we can deliver that plan. And this new investment is supporting a range of sectors, including tourism, innovation, energy transition and skills, and it's being informed by our learning of how island communities have responded as well as adapted to COVID-19. So for example, our recent £2 million Islands Communities Fund was launched over the summer, and that fund provides capital investment for community-led projects that align with community wealth building approaches, supporting employment, community resilience, and contribute to Scotland's transition to net zero and climate resilient living on our islands. And through the fund, we're supporting 29 islands-based community groups and businesses spread across 23 of our islands who've been awarded grants of up to £150,000 each. Now, this built on the success and earlier learning of our 2020 £2 million Islands Green Recovery Programme, which focused on developing sustainable economic activities on islands while also supporting the delivery of the National Islands Plan. During the Scottish Parliament election earlier this year, we set out many ambitions in our manifesto that we believe will support the National Islands Plan as well as our transition to net zero. And as I've highlighted, we are determined for Scotland to lead that race. I've also mentioned that our islands are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, but they also have that huge potential and natural capital that will help us meet our emissions reduction targets. It's in that context that we recently announced the Programme for Government Commitment that at least 3 islands would become carbon neutral by 2040. And I'll come back to that in a moment, but first I'd like to give you a bit of background to that, because I passionately believe that communities should be at the heart of finding the solutions that work for their islands. By carbon neutral, we mean an island where the greenhouse gas emissions captured as CO2 equivalent are in balance with the carbon sinks. And that definition will allow islanders to shape their journey to carbon neutrality. We're determined from the outset to create an environment that will allow all Scottish islands to benefit from the learning and good practices from the Carbon Neutral Islands project. And I'm very pleased to announce this afternoon that the Scottish Government will carry out an extensive mapping exercise that will contribute hugely to the knowledge of carbon accounting and reduction on our islands. We'll also draw carefully on global good practices to inform the delivery of this transformative commitment and continue to foster international relationships and knowledge exchange. I'm also delighted to announce that we'll be taking that ambition even further. We will support not just 3, but 6 islands to become carbon neutral by 2040. Now that goes beyond our previous commitment so that we can ensure more islanders are fully engaged as we move towards carbon neutrality. To begin supporting these 6 islands in their journey towards carbon neutrality, early next summer we're going to begin to undertake carbon audits in order to plan action and to track the progress from there. We'll also continue to consult with communities so that we really understand the local impacts of carbon neutral solutions in order to ensure that we have a just transition. Decarbonising in a just way is at the forefront of our approach, and we not only want to support our islands in reaching carbon neutrality, but also to use that opportunity to help protect their unique heritage, their culture and biodiversity, as well as tackling the other challenges that they face, such as depopulation and fuel poverty too. By next summer, we will publish a report which sets out the next steps that we'll be taking to support our islands to become carbon neutral. And we will, of course, engage with various different stakeholders, including our local authority partners, with the aim of learning as much as possible so that we can help Scotland as a whole reach net zero by 2045. And the Carbon Neutral Islands project provides the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the low carbon energy potential of islands as hubs of innovation in relation to renewable energy and climate change resilience. I hope that that's been helpful and a brief summary of the work that we're doing here in Scotland to support our islands to become hubs of innovation. Our islands are incredibly important to us, and we're determined to do everything that we can to improve outcomes for islanders and to help them flourish now and in the future. Islands aren't just a climate problem that we have to try and solve, they actually could unlock the solutions to the climate challenges that we face. And our activity here in Scotland really wants and seeks to put islanders in charge of their own carbon destiny. And I really look forward to hearing and learning from my fellow speakers in the following discussion. Thank you very much.
Cabinet Secretary, thank you very much. Talk about playing to your audience. I run a geographical society and she's just announced mapping of the islands. That's got to be a good thing. Anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Alphonse Roblem, who is the Minister for Energy, the Environment and Higher Education in the Alland Islands.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mary. Lovely to meet you and lovely to be here. I feel that we have a lot in common and a lot we shall discuss further on. Yes, I am Minister of Energy, Environment and Higher Education, as well as Planning and Housing. And as you can see, the portfolio is in different departments, and I'm a little bit here and a little bit there, but that is because, of course, that when we talk about sustainability and when we talk about the transition, it's not only in one department. It's not only folks in that department that are supposed to fix it. We have to work across every sector. Åland is an autonomy within Finland. It is located in between Finland and Sweden in the middle of the Baltic Sea. We are currently celebrating our first century as an autonomy. And now we are entering our second century, of course doing that facing the epic challenges of creating a sustainable society that will last through time, as we all are. In 2014, the Åland Parliament chose to adopt a common pursuit of a totally sustainable Åland no later than 2051. Though I can say that when it comes to lowering the emissions, we want to reach the targets even before that. But when we talk about total sustainability, it's not only energy, as you know, it's a lot of other things as well. Through a societal-wide network, we established the development and sustainability agenda for Åland, presenting one long-term vision and 7 strategic development goals. The agenda is currently being implemented. For example, when it comes to government budget, where the actions in the budget steer towards different targets in the agenda. The realization of our agenda is at the same time the Åland contribution to the implementation of the global UN 2030 agenda. The strategic development goal number 6 reads, significantly higher proportion of energy from renewable sources plus increased energy efficiency. 100 years ago, the wind was a very important natural resource for us islanders. It made communications possible through sailing, and it made it possible for Åland entrepreneurs to make good business with large sailing ships transporting goods all over the world, which laid the foundation for our prosperity. Today, the wind is once again an important natural resource for us. On Åland, we have built onshore windmills for over 30 years, and with the latest project that is currently being built, we're looking forward to reaching 70% of our energy becoming locally produced and renewable, and that is, of course, very good. But now we are looking at a huge potential for large-scale offshore wind power for export. which Åland Water has turned out to be very suitable for. The total area identified as good for this purpose is approximately 1,000 square kilometers, and when fully built, the total nominal electricity output is estimated at 6 gigawatt. This is 100 times more energy than we need ourselves in our island, which makes it possible for us to make this a source for renewable energy for our neighbors in Sweden and Finland. And of course, when we talk about the islands as hub of innovation, we also know and highlight that as an island you have the possibility to be a good test bed for different solutions, and we have this project called Smart Energy Åland that is exactly that. In cooperation with universities and other stakeholders, we want to use Åland as a test bed for different solutions and different way of doing things. Åland is, as I mentioned, located between two regions with an increasing energy hunger. That energy must, of course, be renewable, and we see huge potential for exporting renewable energy from Åland to Finland and Sweden, but also perhaps to other regions. The Åland government wants to make Åland a natural center for renewable energy in the Nordic region. We see renewable energy as a source for entrepreneurship, for jobs, for innovation and research, as a new economical leg to stand on, as they did for 100 years ago when they used the large sailing boats. I'll stop there as an introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Okay, thank you very much, Minister. It gives me great pleasure in introducing our next speaker. The last time I had a Greenlandic MP across in Scotland, he said it was the coldest he's ever been in his life. I hope that's not the case for our next speaker, but I'm delighted to introduce Rasmus Wendt, who's the Head of Division for Agriculture, Environment, Energy and several other things as well from Greenland. So Rasmus.
Thank you very much. And first and foremost, thank you for the invitation to speak here today. It's a pleasure. And also thank you for the Nordic Council of Ministers for hosting this event here. I thought I might start up by explaining a little bit about Greenland with a view to sort of tell you what kind of challenges we have and what kind of possibilities we see in the future. So you all know that Greenland is the world's largest island. It's, I wrote it down here, almost 2.2 million square kilometers. That's half of Europe. And in this enormous piece of land, we only live 56,000 people. So you can easily imagine that Greenland is the least dense populated area in the world. So talking about islands, Greenland is an island, but Greenland actually consists of a lot of small islands. And the small islands will be the small towns and small settlements. None of our towns and none of our settlements are interconnected by roads or by cabling. So everything in Greenland is remote, and whenever we have to transport either by boat or by helicopter flight. That puts some limitations on the kind of development we can have in Greenland, and also some of the avenues we have to find to become CO2 neutral in the future. But I will talk a little bit more about that in the end. So, talking about islands, it also means that our electricity production or our energy production is sort of a lot of small island operations, since all small settlements will need to have their own power plant and water resources and so forth. And again, that put some limitations to what we can do. Talking about Greenland, we have, as you can probably imagine if you have a fallout of electricity in the middle of the winter, even though it doesn't feel as cold in Greenland, it's actually fatal if the heats disappear for more than 24 hours. And for that reason, we need to make sure that we have very strong backup systems. And that is one of the main challenges when we talk about renewable energy. That is exactly how do we make sure that we have these backup systems. And furthermore, we have very large yearly variations. So the energy systems that we build up will have to cope with a very harsh winter. It could be minus 30 or 40 degrees and storming on the one hand, and on the other hand, during summer times, it can be relatively warm. That means 8, 10, 15 degrees Celsius, not that warm. But still the variations are huge. And also the variations in numbers of hours with sun is pretty big, of course. In the north part of Greenland, we don't have sun at all during winter times, while during summer times, we have sun 24 hours a day. So that's a little bit sort of setting the frame for Greenland, for you to understand how we work with climate change and how we work with innovation. So what I will do now is I will give you 3 examples of innovation within energy and climate change in Greenland. First thing we have to understand when we talk about about innovation is that having strong innovation basically depending upon having a strong ecosystem supporting these innovation processes. And with only 56,000 people and being remote from large urban areas, it can be a challenge. That's no secret. We don't have a strong technical academic environment in Greenland. We don't have laboratories, or we have, of course, a hospital laboratories or so on. But that basically means that the kind of innovation we can come up with in Greenland is the innovation that people working on the floor can create. But nevertheless, I think that also creates real value. So the 3 examples that I'm going to give you is, the first example would be how our small-scale farmers are harvesting energy from water. They are off-grid, almost all of them, because they are remote from even the small settlements. So what they will do is that they will rely, if they can, on hydropower. Hydropower is of course not an invention in Greenland, but the innovative part would be on the craftsmanship on how to set it up, and also how to actually utilize the electricity produced, electrifying as much of the production in the farm as possible. So that would be one example of how we work with innovation in the energy supply in Greenland. Another example would be some hybrid power supply stations that we are setting up around in the coast area, not in the larger cities, but in the small areas. Normally we'll have a small power plant there, which will rely 100% upon oil, and because we have these very harsh winters, it will be a relatively large power plant, and it will then run for all year round. Of course, we will use more generators during winter time than during summertime, but nevertheless, it's still oil. But what we're trying to do here is to combine these traditional or conventional energy plants with different kinds of renewables, and then have some battery power banks to back it up. And that has been a huge success, not only because we will save on the oil we use, that's economically a very good thing, and it's a healthy investment to do. But also, we can actually run the conventional power plant much more effective during winter times, because we will have a full load at that time. So it's definitely something saving our energy consumption or our oil consumption, setting up these plants here. So the innovative part here is basically on optimizing the use of these hybrid power supply stations. These are plug and play. They're produced somewhere else. They are imported into Greenland and set up. But actually working with them and optimizing the use of them is something we can do in Greenland. And that's again about craftsmanship and the local people living there. And also, we can also work with new kinds of renewables. Since we are still have a strong backup system, we can introduce different kinds of micro hydropower systems or solar systems there. So that would be a second example of innovation when it comes to energy supply in Greenland. The third one, I think that comes very close to what you do in the Alland Islands, is that we have an enormous amount of surplus hydropower in Greenland, even when we have shifted our entire energy, domestic energy consumption towards hydropower. We will still have something around 20,000 gigawatt hours yearly of untapped hydropower in Greenland. And our vision is to develop that into an export of Efuels in the future. So our vision is that the third sort of innovative example we'll come up with would be that we will develop different kinds of test beds to develop new e-fuels in the future. We just received a grant from the European Union to help us in this process here. And it shall be no secret that one of the reasons why we are so strongly represented here at this COP is that we hope to find international investors who will work with us on developing these hydropower potentials. So that would be all for me for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasmus. Okay, I'll come to a couple of questions. Mari, I'm going to start with you if I may. Obviously nobody's doing enough and everybody can do more on climate change. The UK, like many of the Nordic nations, is actually slightly ahead of the curve and moving in that journey on net zero. Scotland is absolutely leading in the UK. So, as CAB Secretary for Rural Affairs and Islands, what role have islands got? Have you got examples of specific projects that have been going on in the islands that you would like to highlight where we're showing leadership?
Yeah, well there's so much going on in our islands, and I think when we first outlined our commitment to create 3 carbon neutral islands, and I think the response to that and the engagement with that has been so positive, so good that we knew that we could then look to double it, which I think is really ambitious, but it also shows the ambition of the communities on our islands, because a lot of them are so far ahead in terms of the industries and the kind of projects that they're working on at the moment. So in terms of some examples of that, there's the Clean Energy for EU Islands project that involves 6 Scottish islands, so it's Rum, Egg, Muck, Canna, Fowler and Fair Isle that are already off the grid, and it's looking to see how they can make that clean energy transition as well. And I think the important thing about that, and we've heard about today as well, is about it's really policies that are designed by the local community for their own community too, which is really important. But also that sharing knowledge and expertise, and I think that's where I'm really glad that we've been able to meet today and make those connections, because there's obviously so much happening in other islands across the world that I think that we can also look to learn from and build relationships. Okay, thank you. Is that okay? And there's also another project that we're working on together with Highlands and Islands Enterprise, one of our enterprise agencies, and our Guyland Butte Council as well, working with the communities on Isla and really looking at the energy transition there too. So, and I outlined in my opening remarks too about a lot of the work that's ongoing in Orkney, where they're involved in tidal energy and in hydrogen as well. There's so much work going on there. So I see this as being there. There's lots of exciting opportunities there. So it's really about how we can encourage that, look to develop it, and really try and lead where we possibly can.
Great. So hubs of innovation and opportunity, so as you see it. So Alphonse, sort of same question to you then. You talked about exactly that hubs of innovation and opportunity. So are there specific examples or projects that you have within the Åland?
Yeah, we have this project called Smart Energy Åland, which is about using the good thing about being a small island is that it's quite easy to follow the processes and to see the consequences and to adjust perhaps the test you're doing and to study what's going on. And for Åland as a test bed, when it is an island nation and we are an autonomy, we are a fully functioning society, but we are very small, so it's easy to follow all the steps in being a test bed. So that I think is a very good example for how we can turn being small players in a huge world to something positive. That alongside of course that I think that there is some kind of a if you are an islander, you're very used to you have to find your own solutions, because that's what you always have been doing, because you haven't been able to rely on somebody else coming to help you. And I think that was also something in the mentality that we want to solve the problem. And I think as a small island nation or small island or an island, you have to be like you have to be smart, and you have to use your resources smartly, and you have to cooperate. That is the golden word. Cooperate. And I also think that it's interesting to hear about the islands in this transition era that we are in now, this epic challenge challenges we're facing. Then it's interesting to see that the islands seem to have quite a lot of natural resources. I mean, the wind is blowing really much around an island at the sea and stuff like that. So I think that's just an interesting little note I did when I listened to my colleague here. Thank you.
Thank you, Alphonse. And similarly, Rasmus, I mean, you talked about the strength of the ecosystem, so perhaps picking up on that point, again, what examples would you point us to?
Yeah, I think it's no secret that living abroad from everyone else, that means that you have to fix things. And that creates an innovative thinking. And we certainly also have that in Greenland. That should be no secret. But it's basically about applying, having smart ways of applying the different kinds of energy systems. That would be sort of the level we have right now. But as we are expanding our renewable energy production, we will in the future I'm pretty sure that in the years to come, Greenland will be one of the hubs where you will actually develop new e-fuels. I can tell today, for instance, our parliament is discussing setting up 2 new hydropower plants, which will in fact double the renewable energy production in Greenland, and there's still more to come. So when we have sufficient energy, creating these hubs, innovative hubs for e-fuels, I think that will become a natural thing, because that's actually where we go and find the affordable, clean energy that will be in Greenland.
Great, okay, thank you. And similarly, just maybe go back again, but other sort of key areas of focus going forwards that you see as crucial to utilising the potential of islands, and both as test beds and also in terms of innovation and opportunity. So, Mari.
Some of the key. Sorry, what was the start of the question? The key focus areas.
Yeah. Going forwards.
Well, it's really about. I think we've got to try and encourage that innovation and support that creativity and entrepreneurship. That, as you were saying, that's the way that people in islands have adapted, and you've used to having that mentality and working that way, and really trying to see what we can do to support that as well. And I think that, as I was saying earlier, there is so much opportunity for that on Scottish Islands too. But there are also challenges that come alongside that as well at the same time, and some key challenges that we have to try and address throughout that. I mean, you talked about how your role it doesn't just involve one area, it cuts across lots of different areas. I find that in my role as Cabinet Secretary for the islands as well, where there are so many different issues that impact our islands, whether that's, even though that they can produce so much energy, we have people living in fuel poverty. It's about tackling housing issues and things like that too. So we do have lots of different issues that we need to address at the same time. But I do think in terms of energy and our energy transition, I think that is a key area that we can focus on, and particularly when we look at the transmission links that can encourage between the islands and our mainland too, and the opportunities that come with that. But yeah, there are certainly a lot of challenges to be getting on with, but I do think that our islands are in the prime position to really lead the way on a lot of this work.
And similarly, Alphonse, I think just, islands are classically self-reliant. People are forced to be because of that. So, what help do they need doing some of this? How much can they do themselves? How much do they need assistance? And what sort of assistance do they need?
Yeah, I think, of course, we need assistance when it comes to knowledge and when it comes to stay informed, because that's something that's quite hard to do when everything is moving so rapidly forward. And it's happening so much when it comes to the energy transition and hydrogen and everything that's going on. So it's hard to stay updated with everything that's going on. So that's something we are collaborating around with other people and institutions to try to stay updated. And then, of course, it is also about financing, because if we talk about large-scale offshore wind power, it's nothing that you build with your pocket money. It's quite a huge investment. So we need to find a way to collect that investment and get the investors to find our island and do this stuff. So and then, of course, we are focusing as much as we can on the power to X possibility there are when it comes to hydrogen power and other energy forms and storage and everything, because we are still as an island, of course, we are depending on ferries and transportation over the sea. So it's of course interesting to discuss with the ferry companies and other companies that are interested in perhaps joining us in finding good ways to fuel and run the ferries and in the shipping industry. So we have a lot of things to do.
A lot of challenges. And Rasmus, similar sort of point, but also in terms of that sort of expertise. I mean, I remember speaking previously to others about sometimes scientists come to a place and do things to it rather than involve people in it. Is that an issue? Is that something you think could be done better?
I'm sure it can be done better. I don't think that's the main issue in Greenland. I think actually we have, again, the same problem as Åland. It's about scaling. So what we need to have in Greenland in order to improve on the energy transition is basically scaling. And that means investments. And for the same reason, we were extremely happy that we had this morning here at the same venue here, all the Nordic prime ministers and the Nordic and also the UK pension companies coming up saying that they were ready to come with to finance this transition process. I just want to mention another thing. One of the things we can do as islands is also to work with zero emission shipping. And I think that's one of the areas where, at least in Greenland, we want to focus to look to see how can we actually enhance the process towards decarbonizing our ships. And we have, I think, in Greenland, we have a strong infrastructure, meaning basically we have a lot of ships going in and out of the same ports all the time. And we have a lot of ships and a lot of very, very cheap renewable energy. So I think that could be one of the strongholds in the Greenlandic innovation towards zero emission.
Fantastic. Okay. Interestingly, you mentioned pension funds. There was I remember a few years back we ran an event with pension funds, and communities. And A, they're unbelievably conservative and risk averse.
Yeah.
And B, they don't work with less than £20 million at a time. Is there an issue there? Is there an opportunity there maybe for islands to collaborate more to create the right scale of opportunity for investment?
Yeah. It's definitely so that you need to create the right scale in order to involve these companies. But then I guess we need to find funds who can do small scale investments for small scale communities. But that won't be the pension funds. That have to be public funds who will step in there. But yeah, we will see.
Yeah, or maybe some sort of intermediary to help with that distribution.
Yeah.
Alphonse, did you have a thought about that? And also, what's the sort of balance here in funding between opportunity, between mitigation and between adaptation? I mean, all of these are issues for the islands.
I think that one thing that's very interesting when it comes to funding is that it's very clear now that it is a lot of money going in the right direction. I mean, the direction of renewables and the transition and all the processes that hits behind that word, transition. It is going on, and I think it's interesting and it's very important to know that sometimes the large corporations and the companies, they are way ahead when it comes to see what they have to do and what's have to be done, because to stay in business for the coming 10 or 20 years. And sometimes the business is way ahead while the politics are still a little bit behind. So I think that's one thing that we could perhaps cooperate on as small islands as well, to have these discussions where we can invite investors to talk about the possibilities that there is, and that's also one area of this that is perhaps sometimes a little bit challenging for a small society to keep track of everything that's going on.
Okay, and same, Mary. I mean, these opportunities for alliances and things seem like an obvious point, although my experience of islands is that half of them dislike each other or disagree with each other. So
that's not the case at all. They work very collaboratively,
right,
Mike, on the different. But do you mean in terms of like the finance and
And also between mitigation and adaptation opportunity, where's the money going to? You've mentioned some announcements.
Well, that's the thing, and it's simply just not possible for governments to fund everything. So I think that's where these other partnerships are really important. But it's also about making sure we get the balance of that right in terms of the certain things that we want to incentivise. In terms of the split of that between adaptation, mitigation, and looking at the opportunities, that's where we really have to do it all. I mean, some problems are so urgent that we can't afford not to do the mitigation or the immediate adaptation that's needed. But there's also, we have to make sure that we're investing in the research, the data, to encourage that innovation as well. A lot of the solutions that we have aren't immediately available, and I think given the urgency of the crises that we face, we need to make sure we're working at pace and encouraging that as much as we possibly can. So I can't say the definitive split on what that balance should be, but it is something where we really need to look to try and tackle it all.
Okay. All right. Rasmus, so on behalf of Greenland, so what's your hope for COP then in relation to Greenland as on behalf of the islands communities?
I think I'll perhaps use the mic here. The hope is basically that we can find sufficient funding for all the projects that we want to do, and also the small scale projects, because that is right now what is stopping us in Greenland is finding financing. So I think that will be my wish for Greenland and
okay, and that
islands.
financing coming from private and public sector.
Yeah, both public and private sectors.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. No wise words. Somebody once said you judge a government by its budgets, not by its commitments. So, Alphonse, your thoughts for COP on behalf of the Alland Islands. What do you want to see come from this?
I think that the the clearer message that is sent out from the COP, the clearer political pressure that's shown, and a political commitment to that we do have to make a transition, the easier it gets in every way for us. This we have been talking about during this conversation. The clearer the message, the more investments are heading that way, and the more the markets realize that, okay, this is the way we have to go and stuff like that, and that helps us all, of course. And we are now working, as I said, with this large-scale offshore wind projects and stuff like that, and I hope that it can speed up, that we get a message from the COP that speeds stuff up, speed everything up. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Anne-Marie.
Thank you. Well, there's no denying that we're in a climate crisis, and I think that, you know, sometimes we can focus on the challenges that are presented by that, but I also think that this is an opportunity to really look at the opportunities that can come through that. We have the opportunities here to establish completely new industries that can create jobs, build communities on our islands and really strengthen them as much as possible. So I think that that's really vital, and it's really important for all of us to come together and share these ideas, talk about the innovation that's out there and see where we can collaborate and work together. And I hope that that's something that we can take away from COP.
Okay, thank you very much. I think you've got a sense of a unanimity there about the importance of, obviously, funding is going to be crucial for COP, and there's an easy test of whether it's successful or not. Accelerating action, that's going to be a challenge for everybody. I'm not sure anybody's bureaucracy is actually set up to solve climate change, and we really need to find ways to cut through red tape, don't we? But I hope that's what's mostly come from this, is that opportunity for new alliances that all of us, I hope, identify. And there's definitely a very positive, progressive alliance amongst many of the Nordic nations, and I'd hope Scotland certainly was very keen to be part of that community too, where we are, I hope, showing some leadership across the field. So lots to be done, and lots of friendships to make, I think. So just before I finish, because I can't help it, I'm also going to plug the fact that if you want to find out more about what Scotland has been doing over the last 15 years, we do have a magazine that we've produced. We have a 1-hour documentary that we're making available, which is advertised on the back of the magazine. And we also have recently produced a climate solutions qualification, again focusing on what people can do about climate change and not just going round and round in circles about the science. And that solutions course, we only launched it at Christmas. We have 65,000 people signed up to do that course. And I would absolutely urge you to help disseminate that. One of the single biggest obstacles to people taking genuine action, particularly in the private sector, is they do not know what they're meant to do. So a course focused on how to solve the problem and the solutions that there already are out there is absolutely critical. So if you'd like to find out more about what's going on in Scotland, please look them all out. And it only leaves me to thank our panellists today, Mary Gougen, Alphonse, and, Rasmus, I apologise. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you.